All right, let's dive in. Today, we are tackling, well, probably the biggest, oldest, and most personal mystery there is consciousness. We're going to explore this really fascinating idea that your entire conscious experience might just be an elegant, super evolved user illusion cooked up by your brain. So, let's get into it.
Now, our guide for this whole thing is this amazing paper from the journal Cognitive Neuropsychology. And what it does is propose a way to bring together a bunch of major theories into what it's calling a new standard model of the conscious mind. It's a pretty big deal.
You know, it all really boils down to this one simple but massive question. It's not about what your brain does mechanically. It's about what it feels like to be you, from the inside. That subjective personal experience. Philosophers have a word for it, qualia. That's the famous hard problem of consciousness.
Okay, so here's where this paper gets really interesting. It basically flips the whole problem on its head. It suggests that our gut feeling, that deep intuition that consciousness is mysterious and maybe even non-physical, that's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a massive clue to how our brain is actually modeling itself.
So, to really get a handle on this, the paper gives us two key terms to work with. First, you've got M consciousness. The I is for information. Think of this as the raw nuts and bolts processing your brain is doing, the machinery. Then you've got M consciousness, and the M here stands for mysterious. This is that private, subjective feeling of what it's like to be you. And the big question is, are they actually the same thing?
So let's start with that mysterious feeling, right? I mean, for pretty much all of human history, we've had this idea that there's something non-physical about the mind, a soul, a spirit, the whole ghost in the machine thing. Why is that intuition so incredibly strong?
Well, the paper argues that this feeling isn't us directly perceiving some kind of reality. Instead, it's a leftover, a fragment of a really old, intuitive, but, let's be honest, physically incorrect folk theory of the mind. The belief that the mind is a kind of energy or essence that lives inside the body.
And man, has this idea been persistent. Just look at this timeline. We're talking about intentional burials from over 100,000 years ago, which strongly suggest a belief in a spirit that outlives the body. Fast forward to Homer's Odyssey describing souls as these gauzy spirits, all the way to today with stuff like the Force and Star Wars. This idea of a mind-energy thing is just baked into human culture.
And this isn't just ancient history or sci-fi either. The paper points to modern studies that show we still have this kind of implicit belief in things like, get this, I-beams. The idea that our attention is a physical force shooting out of our eyes. Now, we don't consciously believe that, of course, but our brains are kind of built to model the world that way. That ghostly model is still hanging around in our wiring.
Okay, so that's the mystical side of the coin. Now let's flip it over and look at what science says is actually going on inside the brain. Welcome to the world of inconsciousness, the information side of things.
So, consciousness is all about data. I mean, think about it. Your brain is getting hit with a fire hose of sensory information every single second. How does it pick just one thing to focus on and make that available for you to, actually do something with? Well, the leading explanation for this whole process is something called global workspace theory.
Okay, imagine your brain is like a gigantic boardroom. All your senses are in there, shouting for attention. Look at this, smell that, listen to this. It's chaos. But then one signal, the loudest, most important one, wins the shouting match. It gets amplified. They call this ignition. And suddenly, it's broadcast up on the big screen for the whole boardroom to see. Now your speech department, your memory department, your action planning department, they can all access that one piece of info. That's the global workspace in a nutshell.
Right. So that all makes perfect sense, mechanically. The brain selects info, broadcasts it, great. But this brings us right back to the big puzzle, doesn't it? A computer does that, but we don't think it feels like anything to be a computer. Global workspace theory is brilliant at explaining the I consciousness, the information part, but it doesn't really touch the M consciousness, that subjective feeling. So, what are we missing?
And this is where the paper drops its big aha moment. It introduces a concept that's meant to bridge that huge gap between information and feeling. And it's called the attention schema theory.
Okay, but before we jump into the attention schema, let's talk about its cousin, the body schema. Your brain has this constantly running internal model of your body, where your arms are, how you're sitting, all that. And this model isn't perfect, right? It's why people can feel a phantom limb after an amputation, or why you can be tricked by that creepy rubber hand illusion.
It's a useful but ultimately simplified model of yourself. Okay, now take that exact same idea and apply it to attention. The attention schema theory says the brain doesn't just use attention, it builds a simplified, kind of cartoonish model of its own attention. And here is the absolute key. That simplified model, that's what we experience as subjective awareness. That's consciousness. It's like the brain's user-friendly guide to its own focus system.
There's a quote from the paper that just nails this perfectly. It says, "I consciousness is what the brain actually has. M consciousness is what the brain thinks that it has." See? The I consciousness, the global workspace, all that neural competition, that's the messy, complicated reality. The M consciousness, that subjective feeling, that's the brain's simplified, easy-to-read model of that reality. It's not a ghost, it's a summary report.
Okay, but if our awareness is just a model, what's the point? Why would evolution go to all the trouble of building this fancy user interface? Well, as the paper points out, there are at least two huge evolutionary advantages.
First off, it helps us control our own attention. Just like having a model of your body helps you move it, having a model of your attention helps you focus it and tune out distractions. And second, and this is a big one, it lets us build a model of where other people are paying attention. This is basically the foundation of all social skills, what we call theory of mind.
So let's just make this crystal clear. Attention is the physical thing, the nitty-gritty process of focusing your brain's resources. Awareness is the brain's simplified, internal story about that process. They are super tightly linked, which is why we get them mixed up all the time, but they are not the same thing. You could say awareness is the map, while attention is the actual territory.
All right, so how do we put all these pieces together? This is where we get to the whole point of the paper, creating a single, coherent, standard model that pulls together some of the best ideas in the field.
In this table really lays it out nicely. These theories aren't competing against each other, they're describing different parts of the same system. So you've got global workspace theory, which explains the mechanism, the how of information selection. That's our I consciousness. Then you have higher order thought theory, which says, hey, the brain creates a representation of its own processes. And finally, attention schema theory comes in and tells us exactly what that representation is. It's a simplified model of attention. And that model is what creates the feeling of awareness. So the big takeaway here is this. That subjective feeling of being conscious isn't some magical, non-physical ghost floating around in your head. It's the brain's dashboard. It's a slick, user-friendly interface that lets this incredibly complex system keep an eye on and control its own state of focus. It's not a mystery. It's an elegant, evolved illusion.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty mind-bending thought. If our feeling of conscious awareness is just a simplified story the brain tells itself about its own attention, what does that mean for our deeper sense of self? Is the you that you feel you are just the brain's most useful, most convincing, and most powerful story? Definitely something to chew on.